My principal told my best friend to her face. She was seeing problems where none exist after she reported a teacher for traumatizing me. When we tried to show him proof, he warned us, false accusations have consequences. We just left. That was a year ago. This morning, his retirement made the front page of the news. I was a sophomore when Victoria, the once most popular girl in the school, returned after missing the first 4 months of the year. The entire class went dead quiet when she walked in. There's the girl who got railed and is now a mom at 16, someone yelled, cutting through the silence. The entire class roared with laughter. That day, she was sitting alone in the cafeteria getting papers thrown at her. I tried to walk over to sit beside her, but my friend grabbed my shoulder and handed me a balled-up page. Don't feel bad. She deserves this. She baby-trapped her boyfriend. Instead of going D1 to play football, he's now changing diapers. I watched Victoria for the next few weeks, and I saw how her life at school became hell. Teachers, once fascinated by her kindness and intelligence, now looked at her like she's what's wrong with society. They'd answer Victoria's questions sarcastically, treat her like she didn't belong, and during an intimacy safety class, the teacher giving the presentation stared directly at her the whole way through. The students were no better too. Girls who used to copy her style now whispered SL when she passed. Her friend group exiled her immediately. She had to deactivate her social media within 2 weeks. But all throughout this, I noticed something about Victoria, and it's that Victoria never let the bullying turn her spiteful. I saw her tutoring special needs kids after school. I saw her slip lunch money to a freshman who forgot his. She always had tampons in her backpack for girls who needed them. Nobody ever thanked her for it. They just took what they needed and went back to pretending she didn't exist. Everything changed the day I decided to skip 5th period. My mom had been on another bender the night before and had hurt me, and I needed a smoke break to stop my hands from shaking. I went to the hidden spot behind the gym with no cameras to have a smoke. I was halfway through my cigarette when I heard footsteps. Mr. Peterson, my geometry teacher, appeared around the corner. Everyone loved him. Girls giggled when he made jokes in class. Rough day? He asked, moving closer to me. I knew I'd been caught, so I locked eyes and asked him not to tell anyone. I won't, he responded. I've noticed you've been stressed lately. I could help you relax, he then said. Before I could process what was happening, he had me backed against the wall. His hands started sliding down my arms and I completely froze. My cigarette fell from my fingers. Just let me help you, he whispered. Back the F away. Victoria rounded the corner with pepper spray pointed directly at his face. Her hand was steady even though her voice shook with rage. Mr. Peterson stumbled backward and tried to play it off. I was just checking on a troubled student. You're misunderstanding the situation. I saw everything. Leave. Now. The way she said it made him actually listen. He muttered something about reporting us for smoking and disappeared. I stared at her with thankfulness in my eyes. She told me she came out for a cigarette too. She wasn't a hero. Just right place, right time. Victoria walked me straight to the principal's office. She demanded something be done about Mr. Peterson, but Principal Hayes barely looked up from his computer. Mr. Peterson has taught here for 15 years without a single complaint. Are you sure you didn't misinterpret what you saw? He had her pinned against a wall with his hands on her, Victoria said. Hayes turned to me. Is that what happened? Sometimes when we're upset, we see things differently than they really are. Then he looked at Victoria, and his voice got even more condescending. Given your situation, I understand you might see problems where none exist. If you didn't want drama, maybe you should have thought about that at 15. Victoria's face went red, filled with tears, and she walked out of the office. Too shy or scared to speak, I followed her. I wanted to talk to her right there and then, but she was gone. I didn't see her for the next 2 days, but when she came back, the worst thing possible happened to her. I was in algebra when one of the guys who often made jokes about Victoria called me over to show something on his phone. I was reluctant at first, but he and a few others pressured me until I agreed. He opened up our year group's privated IG gossip account and told me to take a look while laughing. My stomach dropped. There was a post of Victoria, but it wasn't her. It was AI-generated nude photos, with her face photoshopped on. I felt sick. Pretty funny, right? He told me laughing and turning to his friends behind him. I think they thought I was one of them. I just nodded and left the room. I had seen Victoria earlier in the day, so I immediately went looking for her, and I found her, in that smoke spot behind the gym. She was sitting on the ground, bawling her eyes out. I didn't even say anything. I just sat beside her and comforted her. And after 10 minutes of painful sobbing, she turned to me and said, "You're the only friend I have left." She then lunged into me. "You deserve to know the truth," she pressed against my chest. "My boyfriend Jake isn't the father. He left me when I found out I was pregnant." I couldn't believe it. "Then who is the father?" I asked hesitantly. "Mr. Peterson," she said before bursting into tears again. My heart dropped. That was the same teacher who she had stopped from assaulting me. I held Victoria while she cried and my mind raced. Everything suddenly made sense. The way Peterson had cornered me, how confident he'd been. He'd done this before. Victoria told me it started last year when she was struggling in his class. He offered extra tutoring sessions after school. At first it seemed normal. Then he started making comments about how mature she was for her age, how special she was. She said she should have known better, but she was 15, and he made her feel important. One day he kept her after tutoring, and that's when it happened. She never told anyone because who would believe her? The most beloved teacher versus a popular girl everyone already thought was stuck up. I asked her why she came back to school if everyone hated her. She wiped her eyes and said she couldn't let him win. She had to graduate. She had to show her baby that you don't give up when things get hard. But now with these fake photos, she didn't know if she could take it anymore. I told her we had to do something. We couldn't let Peterson get away with this. She laughed bitterly and reminded me what happened in the principal's office. Nobody would listen to us. I said maybe not alone, but together we could figure something out. She looked at me like I was crazy, but I could see a tiny spark of hope in her eyes. We sat there for another 20 minutes just talking. She told me about her parents, how disappointed they were, how they kept asking who the father was, but she couldn't tell them the truth. They'd never believe Peterson would do something like that. Her dad coached the junior varsity basketball team, and Peterson helped out sometimes. They were friends. Her mom volunteered at school events and always talked about what a great teacher Peterson was. Victoria said telling them would destroy everything. I understood. My own mom wouldn't believe me about anything on a good day. On a bad day, she'd probably blame me for it. The bell rang and we had to go back inside. Victoria asked if I'd sit with her at lunch tomorrow. I said yes immediately. She smiled for the first time since I'd found her crying. It was small but real. We walked back into school together and I could feel people staring. Someone made a comment about me being the next one to get knocked up if I hung around Victoria. I ignored them. Victoria held her head high like she always did. I wondered how she found the strength. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking thinking about Peterson, about how many other girls he might have hurt, about how he was still teaching, still coaching, still being everyone's favorite teacher while Victoria got treated like garbage. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe other complaints, maybe something that would help us. I found the school's website and Peterson's bio page. Teacher of the year 3 times. Coached the mathletes to state championships. Volunteer work with troubled youth. It made me sick. Everything about him was perfect on paper. No wonder nobody would believe Victoria. I kept digging, checking old yearbooks online, looking for any pattern, any sign that someone else had noticed something wrong, but there was nothing. Just smiling photos of Peterson surrounded by grateful students and beaming parents. The next morning, I met Victoria at her locker before first period. She looked exhausted but determined. Dark circles under her eyes that her concealer couldn't quite hide. I told her I'd been thinking all night and we needed to be smart about this. She nodded and said she'd been thinking too, barely sleeping between her baby's feedings and the anxiety churning in her stomach. We couldn't go through official channels since nobody would listen. We had to find another way. I suggested we start by figuring out if Peterson had done this to anyone else. Victoria's face went dark. She said she'd wondered the same thing for months, especially during those long nights when she couldn't sleep. We decided to split up and ask around carefully, not directly. Just casual conversations to see if anyone else had weird experiences with Peterson. Victoria would talk to girls in her grade who'd had him for geometry. I'd check with sophomores currently in his classes. We agreed to meet at lunch and compare notes. The morning dragged by painfully slow. In English, I sat next to Samantha, who had Peterson third period. I asked how her geometry class was going, trying to keep my voice light and conversational. She shrugged and said it was fine. I pushed a little, asking if Peterson was as great as everyone said. She got this weird look, her pencil pausing mid-sentence, and said, "Yeah, he was helpful if you needed it." Then she turned away and didn't talk to me the rest of class, suddenly very interested in her notes. By lunch, I'd talked to 6 different girls. 3 gave me the same kind of weird look Samantha did, their faces closing off the moment I mentioned Peterson's name. One actually started to say something, then stopped and said, "Never mind," her voice trailing off. Victoria was already at our table in the far corner of the cafeteria, the one by the broken vending machine that hummed too loud. Nobody else would sit there anyway. She looked frustrated, picking at her sandwich without eating. She'd gotten similar responses. Girls would start to say something, then change their minds. One junior named Lauren had actually teared up when Victoria mentioned Peterson's tutoring sessions. But when Victoria asked if she was okay, Lauren practically ran away, leaving her lunch tray behind. We knew we were onto something, but nobody would talk. I remembered something from true crime podcasts my mom listened to when she was sober enough to focus. Predators rarely had just one victim. They had patterns, types, methods. Peterson liked vulnerable girls, girls who were struggling in class, girls who needed help, girls who wouldn't be believed. Victoria fit perfectly. Pretty, popular, but struggling with math. Parents who trusted Peterson implicitly. Nobody would believe her over him. I wondered how many others fit that same profile. How many girls had sat in his classroom feeling trapped. After school, Victoria had to pick up her baby from her aunt's house. She'd been watching him during the day while Victoria was at school, one of the few family members who hadn't completely written her off. I offered to come with her, but she said her aunt already thought she was a bad influence on me, that hanging out with a teen mom would ruin my future too. Instead, I went to the library and pulled yearbooks from the last 5 years. The librarian gave me a strange look but didn't ask questions. I started making a list of girls who'd been in Peterson's geometry classes. Then I cross-referenced with honor roll lists, looking for students who suddenly improved in math. It was tedious work, but I found a pattern. Every year, there were 2 or 3 girls who went from C's or D's to A's in Peterson's class. Their grades in other subjects stayed the same, just math shot up dramatically. I took pictures of the pages with my phone, making sure to get clear shots of the names and grade progressions. Evidence. We needed evidence. That night, Victoria texted me. Her baby had been crying for hours and she was exhausted, but she'd thought of something. Peterson kept a gradebook in his desk. Old school paper one besides the digital system. She'd seen it during one of their tutoring sessions. He'd made notes in it. Not just grades, but comments about students. She remembered seeing her name with stars next to it. At the time, she thought it meant he thought she was special, that she was finally good at something. Now she wondered what those stars really meant. The next day at school was harder. The AI photos were still circulating despite the administration's supposed zero-tolerance policy. Someone had printed them out and taped them inside Victoria's locker. She tore them down without a word, but I saw her hands shaking, saw the way she blinked back tears. In the hallway between classes, a group of guys made gross comments as we walked by. One of them, Bradley, the quarterback who thought he was God's gift, actually reached out like he was going to grab Victoria. I stepped between them and told him to back off. He laughed and said I was protective of my new girlfriend. His friends thought that was hilarious, their laughter echoing off the lockers. Victoria pulled me away before I could respond. She said it wasn't worth it. They weren't worth it. Peterson walked by while we were at Victoria's locker. He slowed down and looked right at us, not at Victoria, at me. His expression was friendly, concerned even, the perfect mask of a caring teacher. He asked if everything was all right, his voice gentle and paternal. I felt my skin crawl but forced myself to nod. He said if I ever needed to talk, his door was always open. Then he walked away like nothing had happened, his shoes clicking on the linoleum. Victoria's face was pale. She whispered that was exactly how it started with her. The concern, the open door, the wanting to help. I felt sick. At lunch, we made a plan. We needed to get into Peterson's classroom and find that gradebook. Victoria mentioned she'd helped with math department inventory during summer school and still had access through the main department office. They never changed the locks, and she'd noticed teachers kept spare classroom keys in the supply closet. We'd go after school when Peterson had basketball practice. He was assistant coach and was always gone by 3:30 and didn't come back until after 5. That gave us time to search. It was risky, but we didn't have other options. Nobody would talk to us. The administration wouldn't listen. We had to find proof ourselves. The rest of the day crawled by at an agonizing pace. In geometry class, I watched Peterson teach like nothing was wrong. He made jokes about parallel lines never meeting, just like some people in high school. Students laughed, girls smiled at him. He called on me once, and I managed to answer without my voice shaking. He said good job and moved on. I wondered how he did it, how he could hurt Victoria, try to hurt me, probably hurt others, and still stand up there like some perfect teacher. The bell finally rang, and I met Victoria by the gym. We watched Peterson head to practice, laughing with some players about last week's game. Coast was clear. Victoria led me to the math department office. this. The door was unlocked. Teachers were always in and out. She went straight to the supply closet and found the key ring with all the classroom spares. Peterson's room number was clearly labeled. My hands were sweating as we walked down the empty hallway. Peterson's classroom was at the end, past the other math rooms and the tiny office where tutoring happened. The key worked perfectly. Inside, the room looked normal. Inspirational math posters about perseverance, student work on the walls. His desk was neat, organized, a coffee mug that said "World's Best Teacher" sitting next to a stack of papers. We started searching. Victoria took the desk drawers while I checked the filing cabinet. Nothing in the first drawer. Second drawer had tests. Third had attendance sheets. Bottom drawer was locked. Victoria found a letter opener and we managed to pry it open. Inside were 3 grade books, current year and 2 previous years. Victoria grabbed them and we started flipping through. At first it looked normal. Grades, assignments, normal teacher stuff. Then Victoria found the pages with stars. 5 girls in the current book had stars by their names. 3 were juniors, 2 sophomores. All had shown grade improvement in the second semester. The previous years showed the same pattern. Stars by certain names. Always girls. Always students who'd struggled then suddenly improved. Victoria recognized some names. Lauren was there with 3 stars. So was a girl named Natalie who'd graduated last year. Another named Julie who'd moved away junior year. I took pictures of every page with stars, making sure the names and markings were clear. We had to move fast. Practice would end soon. As we put the books back, a folded paper fell out. Victoria grabbed it. It was a note, written on the kind of stationery teenage girls used. Handwriting that looked young, careful cursive. Mr. P, thank you for yesterday. I won't tell anyone. Please don't fail me. No signature, but the paper looked old, worn, like he'd kept it for a while. Victoria's face went white. She whispered that she'd written something similar. He'd made her write it. Said it was to show she was grateful for the tutoring. Now she realized it was insurance, making it look like she was the one pursuing him. We heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart stopped. We shoved everything back in the drawer and locked it. The footsteps got closer, measured and deliberate. Victoria grabbed my hand and pulled me behind the door just as it opened. Principal Hayes walked in. He looked around the empty classroom, then went to Peterson's desk. He opened the top drawer and pulled out a folder, flipped through it, put it back, and left. We waited 5 minutes before moving, barely breathing. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely walk. Victoria looked ready to throw up. We slipped out and locked the door behind us. Outside, we sat on the bleachers trying to process what we'd seen. Hayes checking Peterson's desk, the stars, the note, the pattern going back years. Victoria said we had to tell someone, but who? The principal was clearly involved somehow. The school board? The police? Would they believe 2 teenage girls with phone pictures and a wild story? I said we needed more. We needed one of those other girls to talk, to back up Victoria's story. She agreed, but said none of them would. They were scared, just like she'd been scared. Still was scared. That night, I couldn't eat dinner. My mom was passed out anyway, so she didn't notice. I kept thinking about those names, those stars. How many girls had Peterson hurt? How long had this been going on? I looked up some of the names on social media. Lauren had her profiles locked down tight. Natalie seemed to have disappeared from social media entirely after graduation. Julie's last posts were from 2 years ago, right before she moved. None of them seemed active anymore, just like Victoria had to delete hers, pattern after pattern. The next morning, Victoria texted that she was staying home. Her baby had a fever, and she couldn't leave him. I said I'd keep digging on my own. At school, I felt exposed without her, like Peterson would somehow know what we'd done. But he acted normal in class, taught his lesson about angles and proofs, made his jokes. I watched him more carefully now, though. Noticed how he always picked certain girls to help. Quiet ones who sat alone, ones who looked tired or stressed. He had a type. Victoria had been an exception, popular, confident, at least on the outside, but she'd been vulnerable in her own way, struggling with math in a family that expected perfection. At lunch, I sat alone at Victoria's table. Across the cafeteria, I spotted Lauren sitting with a few other quiet girls. I'd seen her name in the gradebook, 3 stars next to it. She looked tired, thin, like she wasn't eating enough. I walked over and asked if I could sit. The other girls looked confused, but Lauren nodded. I made small talk for a few minutes about classes and homework. Then, carefully, I mentioned I was struggling in Peterson's class. Lauren's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I said I was thinking about asking for tutoring, but wasn't sure. Lauren put her fork down and said quietly that I should find a different tutor, maybe a student tutor, or online help, anything but staying after school with Peterson. The other girls looked uncomfortable. One changed the subject quickly to the upcoming winter formal, but Lauren kept looking at me. After lunch, she caught up with me in the hallway. She asked why I was really asking about Peterson. I took a risk and told her about Victoria, about what Peterson did to her. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. She said she couldn't talk about it. She'd worked so hard to forget. Her parents thought she was being dramatic when she tried to tell them. They said Peterson was a good man who'd helped her grades improve. Why was she being ungrateful? She transferred to online school for senior year just to get away from him, but the memories didn't go away. I asked if she'd be willing to help Victoria, to speak up so people would believe. Lauren shook her head. She said she couldn't go through it again. The questions, the doubt, the way people would look at her. She'd seen what they did to Victoria, the AI photos, the rumors. She couldn't handle that. She was applying to colleges. She needed recommendation letters. She couldn't have this follow her. I understood, but I was frustrated. How many girls would stay silent while Peterson kept teaching? Lauren must have seen it on my face because she said she was sorry. Then she walked away. That afternoon, I had study hall in the library. I was researching whether we could report anonymously to someone outside the school when Brittany sat down across from me. She was in my English class. Quiet, good grades, kept to herself. She asked what I was working on. I said just research for a project. She nodded, then slid a folded paper across the table. She said Lauren told her I was asking about Peterson. Then she left before I could respond. I unfolded the paper. It was a screenshot of text messages. Peterson's number asking a student to meet him after school for extra help. Then the messages got weird, asking if she'd told anyone about their sessions, saying she was special, that he could help her with more than just math. My hands shook as I read. This was proof. Actual proof. I texted Victoria immediately. She called me from her aunt's house. I told her about Lauren, about Brittany, about the messages. She started crying. Not sad tears, relieved tears. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't alone. Other girls had been through this too. We agreed to meet tomorrow to figure out next steps. We had evidence now. We had to be smart about how to use it. Peterson had been doing this for years. He was careful, protected. We had to be more careful. That night, I made copies of everything. The photos from the gradebooks, the screenshot Brittany gave me. I emailed them to myself, to Victoria, saved them on a flash drive. If something something happened to our phones, we'd still have proof. I barely slept. Kept thinking about Peterson in class tomorrow, acting normal, picking his next victim, maybe already grooming someone new. The thought made me sick. We had to stop him, but we were just kids. He was a beloved teacher. Who would listen to us? The next day, Victoria was back at school. Her baby was better and her aunt could watch him. She looked exhausted but determined. We met before first period to plan. We decided to try one more time with the administration. This time we'd bring the evidence, the photos, the messages, everything. If Hayes wouldn't listen, we'd go to the superintendent. If they wouldn't listen, we'd go to the school board. Someone had to care that a teacher was preying on students. Someone had to stop him. We walked into the main office together. The secretary asked if we had an appointment. We said it was urgent. She rolled her eyes but called Hayes. He came out looking annoyed. He said he had 5 minutes before a meeting. We followed him to his office. Victoria spoke first. She said we had evidence that Peterson was inappropriate with students. Hayes sighed and said we'd been through this before. That's when I pulled out the printed photos, the gradebook pages, the stars, the pattern. Hayes barely glanced at them. He said grade improvement wasn't evidence of anything except good teaching. Then I showed him Brittany's screenshot. His expression changed. He studied it carefully, asked where we got it. I said a student gave it to us. Someone else Peterson had targeted. Hayes put the paper down and looked at us. He said this was a serious accusation. If we were wrong, we could ruin a man's career. Did we understand that? Victoria said Peterson ruined her life. She was 16 with a baby because a teacher she trusted took advantage of her. How was his career more important than that? Hayes said he'd look into it, that we should go to class and let him handle it. Something about his tone was off, too calm, too dismissive. We left his office feeling defeated again. Victoria said he wasn't going to do anything. He'd probably warn Peterson, and then it would get worse. I agreed. We needed another plan. As we walked to class, someone called Victoria's name. We turned to see Mrs. Chen, the AP biology teacher. She asked if we could talk after school, said it was important. We agreed, confused. Mrs. Chen had never paid attention to either of us before. She taught seniors mostly. We didn't have her for any classes, but something in her expression made us curious. The day passed slowly. Peterson seemed different in geometry, distracted. He kept checking his phone, stumbled over problems he usually solved easily. At one point, he stared right at me for too long, like he was trying to figure something out. I kept my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. Did Hayes tell him about our meeting? Did he know we'd been in his classroom? After class, he asked me to stay behind. My blood went cold. I said I had to get to my next class. He said it would just take a minute. Other students were filing out. Soon we'd be alone. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the door. He called my name again, his voice taking on a sharper edge. Said we really needed to talk. About my grades, about my potential, about how he could help me succeed in his class. The words were innocent, but the tone wasn't. I practically ran out of the room. In the hallway, I texted Victoria. Peterson was on to us. We had to be careful. She texted back that she'd gotten a weird vibe from him in the hall too, like he was watching her. We agreed to stick together the rest of the day. Safety in numbers. After school, we met Mrs. Chen in her empty classroom. She closed the door and pulled the blinds down. That made me nervous, but Victoria seemed to trust her. Mrs. Chen sat on a desk and looked at us for a long moment. Then she asked if we were the ones asking questions about Peterson. We exchanged glances but nodded. She said she'd heard from Lauren and Brittany that we were trying to do something. She wanted to help. Victoria asked why she cared. Mrs. Chen said she'd noticed patterns over the years. Girls who suddenly dropped out of activities, who changed from outgoing to withdrawn, who improved drastically in just Peterson's class. She'd tried talking to Hayes about it 2 years ago. He shut her down immediately, told her she was seeing problems where none existed, threatened her job if she kept spreading rumors. So she stayed quiet, but kept watching, kept noticing. I asked if she had any proof. She shook her head. Just observations and suspicions. But she said she knew other teachers who'd noticed things too. Mr. Rodriguez in Spanish, Ms. Park in history. They'd all tried to speak up at different times. All got shut down. Peterson was untouchable. He brought in awards for the school. Parents loved him. The school board thought he walked on water. Mrs. Chen said the only way to stop him was to go outside the school system entirely. Victoria asked what she meant. Mrs. Chen pulled out a business card. It was for a detective at the local police department, Detective Sarah Mills. Mrs. Chen said she specialized in crimes against minors. She'd take us seriously, but we needed to be prepared. Once we talked to police, everything would change. The school would circle wagons. People would take sides. It would get ugly. Were we ready for that? I looked at Victoria. She was holding the card like it might burn her. I knew she was thinking about her baby, about her parents, about how much worse things could get. But then she straightened her shoulders and said yes, she was ready. She couldn't let Peterson hurt anyone else. Mrs. Chen said she'd call Detective Mills and set up a meeting. She told us to gather all our evidence, make copies of everything, and be careful. Peterson had friends in high places. The next 2 days were tense. Peterson watched us constantly. In class, in the halls, even at lunch I'd catch him staring from across the cafeteria. Other students started noticing too. Bradley made a joke about Peterson having a thing for the teen mom and her friend. His buddies laughed, but it made my skin crawl. Victoria started having someone walk her to her car after school. Usually me or one of the few girls who still talked to her. Detective Mills agreed to meet us that Saturday at the police station. Mrs. Chen came with us for support. The station was smaller than I expected, just a regular building downtown. Detective Mills was younger than I thought too. Maybe early 30s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She took us to a private room and said we could tell her everything. No judgment, no rush, just the truth. Victoria went first. She told the whole story, the tutoring, the compliments, how Peterson made her feel special, then how things changed, how he started touching her shoulders, her hands, how he'd keep her after sessions, how one day he kissed her and she froze, how it escalated from there, how she was too scared and confused to tell anyone, how when she got pregnant he convinced her to blame Jake, said no one would believe her anyway. A respected teacher versus a popular girl. She'd just look like she was trying to cover up sleeping around. Detective Mills took notes without interrupting. When Victoria finished, I showed her our evidence, the photos of the grade books, the stars by names, Brittany's screenshot, the pattern going back years. Detective Mills studied everything carefully. She asked questions about dates, times, specific incidents. She was thorough but gentle, professional. When we finished, she said she believed us. But believing wasn't enough. She needed more evidence to build a case. She asked if we could get other victims to come forward. I told her about Lauren, about the other girls who wouldn't talk. Detective Mills said she understood their fear, but their testimony would make the case stronger. She gave us her direct number and said to call if we remembered anything else or if anything new happened. She also said to be careful. If Peterson suspected police involvement, he might try to destroy evidence parents or intimidate witnesses. We left the station feeling both hopeful and terrified. Someone finally believed us, but now it was real. There would be an investigation, questions, maybe a trial. Victoria's parents would find out the truth. The whole school would know. In the car, Mrs. Chen said we were brave, that she was proud of us. But I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was going to throw up. Monday at school was weird. Peterson wasn't there. A substitute taught geometry. Rumors flew immediately. Someone said he was sick. Someone else said he was at a teaching conference. But Victoria and I knew better. The investigation had started. At lunch, Principal Hayes called us to his office. He looked furious. He asked if we'd gone to the police. Said we should have come to him first. Let him handle it internally. Victoria laughed. Actually laughed in his face. She said we tried that and he did nothing. Hayes said we didn't understand the damage we were causing. Peterson was a good man. A good teacher. These accusations would ruin him. Did we want that on our conscience? I found my voice and said, what about the girls he hurt? What about their lives? Their damage? Hayes said that was alleged. Unproven. We were destroying a man's career on rumors and misunderstandings. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said we should be careful. That making false accusations had consequences. Legal consequences. Victoria stood up and said we were done. We had nothing else to say without a lawyer present. Hayes' face went red, but he let us leave. In the hallway, Victoria was shaking. She said Hayes basically threatened us. I agreed. We texted Detective Mills about the meeting. She said to document everything. Write down exactly what was said. Save any emails or messages. Build a paper trail. The rest of the week was chaos. Peterson didn't come back. The substitute became permanent. Rumors went wild. Someone said Peterson was arrested. Someone else said he fled the state. The truth was less dramatic. Detective Mills told us he was on administrative leave pending investigation, but the damage to his reputation had started. Parents were asking questions. The school board was getting involved. Then the backlash hit. Peterson's supporters came out swinging. A group of parents started a petition saying he was being railroaded. They called Victoria and me liars looking for attention. The AI photos of Victoria resurged with new captions about her trying to destroy a good man because he wouldn't sleep with her. It was brutal. Victoria missed 3 days of school. I started eating lunch in the library to avoid the cafeteria, but then something unexpected happened. Brittany came forward. She walked into the police station with her parents and gave a full statement about Peterson's inappropriate messages and behavior. Her parents had found the texts and believed her. Then Lauren's parents called Detective Mills. They said their daughter had something to say. One by one, girls started speaking up. Not publicly, not at school, but to the police, to the investigators. Mrs. Chen kept us updated. She said more teachers were coming forward too. Not with direct evidence, but with observations. Concerns they'd raised that were dismissed. Patterns they'd noticed. Mr. Rodriguez had documentation going back 3 years of his concerns about Peterson's behavior with female students. Ms. Park had emails where Hayes told her to mind her own business when she'd raised red flags. The investigation expanded. It wasn't just about Peterson anymore. It was about a system that protected him, that silenced concerns, that prioritized reputation over student safety. Detective Mills interviewed dozens of people. Current students, former students, teachers, administrators. The stories were depressingly similar. Girls who were struggling, Peterson who offered help, boundaries that slowly eroded, and a school that looked the other way. The investigation took months, not weeks. There were depositions, evidence reviews, legal procedures that seemed to drag on forever. Peterson remained on leave while lawyers battled over every detail. The community stayed divided, some calling for his head, others insisting on his innocence. Victoria and I continued going to school, facing daily judgment from both sides. Some days were harder than others. The AI photos kept resurfacing despite multiple takedown attempts. New rumors spread weekly, but we had each other, and slowly, we had others too. Girls who'd been silent started nodding at us in the halls. Some even whispered thank you when no one was looking. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Peterson was arrested. The charges were serious. Multiple counts of inappropriate conduct with minors. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just our testimony, but physical evidence they found when they searched his home. Photos on his computer, trophies from victims. The grade books with stars weren't just tracking grades. They were tracking conquests. The community exploded. Parents who defended him were shocked. Others said they'd always felt something was off. The school held emergency meetings. They brought in counselors. They promised full cooperation with the investigation. Hayes announced his early retirement, said he wanted to spend more time with family. Everyone knew the truth. He was getting out before they could fire him. But the best part was what happened with the students. The ones who'd tortured Victoria started backing off. Some even apologized. Not many, but a few. The AI photos disappeared. Bradley got suspended for 2 weeks when it came out he was one of the ones who'd created them. His football scholarship offers started getting withdrawn. Turns out colleges don't like students who create explicit images of minors, even AI-generated ones. Victoria started healing. She still had hard days, still dealt with judgment from some people, but she also had support now. Other survivors who understood, teachers who believed her, even some parents who apologized for not seeing the truth sooner. She started talking about college again, about becoming a social worker to help other girls like her, like us. The legal process was slow. There were hearings and delays and motions. Peterson's lawyer tried every trick to get the charges reduced or dismissed, but the evidence was too strong, too many victims, too much documentation. Eventually, he took a plea deal. 15 years in prison, registry as an offender, never allowed to teach again. It wasn't enough for what he'd done, but it was something. Justice of a sort. The school district made changes too. New policies about student-teacher interactions, mandatory reporting training, anonymous tip lines. They couldn't undo the damage, but they could try to prevent it happening again. Some people said it was too little too late. They were probably right, but at least future students might be safer. I testified at one of the hearings, talked about that day behind the gym, how Victoria saved me, how many other girls she'd tried to protect even when everyone hated her. The prosecutor said our evidence was crucial. The gradebooks, the photos, the pattern we'd documented. Without that, Peterson might have walked. Victoria squeezed my hand when I finished testifying. We'd done it. Together. Life went back to normal eventually. As normal as it could be. Victoria graduated with honors despite everything. Walked across that stage with her baby in the audience and her head held high. I had 2 more years of high school, but they were different. Better. The culture had shifted. People were more aware, more careful, more willing to speak up. Mrs. Chen became our unofficial mentor. She helped Victoria with college applications, helped me figure out what I wanted to do with my life. She said we'd shown more courage than most adults she knew, that we'd changed things, saved lives probably. I didn't know about that. We just did what felt felt right, what had to be done. Peterson's sentence made the local news. They didn't name victims, but everyone knew. Victoria gave one interview, anonymous, voice disguised. She said she hoped other girls would speak up, that they'd be believed, that the adults meant to protect them would actually protect them. She said she was healing, moving forward, that her baby would grow up in a better world because people finally listened. And that's really the whole story. It was messy and painful and complicated. Nothing like the dramatic revelations you see on TV. Just two teenage girls who refused to let a predator keep hurting people, who found their voices when everyone tried to silence them, who learned that sometimes doing the right thing means everything gets worse before it gets better. But it does get better. Victoria's in college now, thriving. I'm applying next year, thinking about criminal justice or social work, maybe both. Oh, and those AI photos? The creators got more than just school punishment. Turns out creating and distributing explicit images of minors, even AI-generated ones, is a federal crime. They're all doing community service and probation. Their college dreams are pretty much shot. Good riddance if you ask me. Peterson's in prison where he belongs. Hayes is gone. The school is safer. Not perfect, but better. And Victoria? She's the strongest person I know. Still kind, still helping others, still refusing to let what happened define her. She says her baby saved her life, gave her a reason to fight. But I think she saved herself, and maybe saved a lot of other girls too. That's all I've got. Thanks for reading this absolute novel. Had to get it all out. If you're going through something similar, speak up. Find someone who believes you. Don't give up. It gets better. I promise.